Hi, I'm Brian Neher, and welcome to this short painting demonstration. Let me tell you a few quick things about myself first. I've been a portrait painter for the past 14 years, painting commissions for numerous families around the country. My work has been featured in American Artist magazine and on national public television. While I have been blessed to have seen some success, I sort of think it's funny when people ask me about my process for painting. The truth is that it's not really my process at all. When I started my journey as a painter, I knew that I needed help, and I was fortunate enough to get some of the best help available. For example, I got to learn from the legendary artist Joe Bowler, who gave up tons of his time to help me, a young artist who could not really give much in return. He greatly impacted my philosophy about painting. But I also learned a lot from intense study of the old masters, the painters of the last century who really encapsulated everything that painting should be. They were the greatest portrait painters who ever lived, drawing on the discoveries of great painters in front of them. In turn, their writing and their work is a wealth of information for today's painters, and they have greatly influenced me. What I'm saying is this: I am not sharing deep secrets or easy systems in my DVDs. Everything I say is available in other resources if you have enough time to dig it out. But who has that much time? My job is to help you reach your goals much faster. Remember, I am not sharing my process. I'm sharing the process of numerous truly great painters. When you really get down to it, there are 4 specific principles that you have to get right if you're going to paint. They are drawing, value, color, and edges. In this simple demonstration, I'm going to show you how to apply those 4 principles. I want to say this: these 4 principles are not necessarily easy, and it would be silly for me to suggest that I can teach them to you in an hour. But I am going to give you a very solid introduction, and by the time this video is over, you will be able to use those principles. Each of these principles is covered in far more detail in separate DVDs on my website. In fact, there's one DVD for each principle. And then there is a demonstration of a portrait painting. It is very in-depth and will give you great insight into how to really use those principles. But today, I just want to show you how to apply these 4 principles to this simple picture of an apple. Before I start, I want to take just a moment and explain the 4 principles. First, there's drawing. Drawing refers to actually getting the image down on canvas accurately with correct proportions. It is important to note that we are not going to draw objects. Rather, we are going to learn how to see and work with shapes, and we are going to spend some time teaching you to measure so that those shapes are accurately drawn. Next is values. Values refers to the 3-dimensional appearance of any object. We will talk about how to set reference points and how to establish value relationships. Next is color. Now, color is the most exciting part of painting for me. We have enormous power to express emotion through the colors that we use. I'm going to show you exactly how to mix colors and use them in a way that brings harmony to a painting. The last principle is edges. Now, edges are like the punctuation in painting. They help to define how much emphasis certain elements should get within your painting. Now, after all that, let's start painting this apple. Okay, the first principle I talked about was actually drawing. Getting things accurate and in proportion. I'm going to be using 2 photos today. It's really one photo of a colored photo of an apple here, but I have a black and white photo as well. And what I mean by drawing is measuring accurately, getting things in proportions. In order for me to do that, I need to make a couple of decisions first. So let me go ahead and get my paintbrush here. And I'm going to mark off on this canvas where I want the top of this apple to be. And this is going to be right about there is where I want it. And then how tall do I want this apple to be? I need to know how tall I want that apple to be. And for this demonstration, since we're just doing a simple demonstration, I'm going to put it right about in here. Okay, so now I know where the top of the apple is and the bottom. And now I need to figure out where I want the sides of the apple to be. So I'm going to say I want this side of the apple to come right about here. Now, in order for me to find this other side of the apple, I need to do a little bit of measuring, and that's when drawing comes into play. And this is what I mean by drawing, measuring accurately. So I'm going to take a little tool here and measure from the top of the apple to the bottom of the apple. Okay, and then I'm going to take that same measurement and I'm going to compare it to see how it compares as far as what the ratio is if I turn it horizontally and compare it from one side of the apple here to the other side of the apple, just to see where it falls. And as I measure that, it comes just a little bit further on this side, almost the same distance, but just a little bit further on this side. So that gives me a clue as to where I need to put this side of the apple. So let's go ahead and do that. I can't take the same measurement, of course, that I've done in the photograph because I'm making this apple a different size here on my canvas. So I'll go to my canvas and I'll make that measurement there. Now I'll turn it and rotate it. Let me set this down real quick. And I'll rotate that just like we did in our photograph, and I'll mark off right there. Now I know that this is the same distance as here, but remember when we measured our apple over there, it came out to be just a little bit more. So let me go ahead and move that measurement over just a tad bit more. And that's really where the side of the apple is going to be. Now, I know exactly where my apple needs to go. It's going to be within these confines here, the top, the sides, and the bottom. And that's what I mean by drawing. When I talk about drawing, it's measuring, getting things accurate. Now, let's go ahead and start painting. And when I paint, another aspect of painting is trying to find shapes instead of just lines. I don't want to just sit here and outline this apple. In fact, as I'm painting this apple, this is a demonstration not to make it look just like this photograph, because that's not my purpose in doing this in this demonstration. Painting goes much farther than that, and basically I'm going to be interpreting the shapes on this apple to come up with the form of the apple in more of a loose, painterly way. Just to let you know, I'm not trying to copy this photograph, because if I was, it would make there wouldn't be a real purpose to do that, because the photograph has already done that for me. So what I want to do is I want to find the big shapes. As I'm looking at this apple, these big shapes like this big leaf, look at that as one big shape. That stem is one shape. Even this white patch here, that highlight, is one big shape. See how this red comes around here, then comes up, and then this dark area. All that is one big shape. And even this lighter shape on the side here, that's what I'm thinking about, is shapes. And that's how I'd like to try to get you to think as well. Because the faster you can think in terms of shapes, the more you're going to start to think like a painter. So let's go ahead and lay some paint down. I'm going to lay the obvious one down here first just to get started. I'm going to go ahead and start on this and do a few things, and then we'll talk about what I did there. Another reason I have two photographs here. This is a black and white photograph that I'm working from, and basically this is to tell me more about the values, which I'm going to talk about in just a second, which is actually the second principle that we need to address. But I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of painting first. Okay, I know I need to mix a green color, sort of a warm green. Warm greens and cool greens. That actually goes back to another principle which we'll talk about in just a minute, but okay, I know this is the top of the apple, so this comes up a little bit more and then down. Let's go ahead and start. Now, as you notice, I did not try to draw an outline around that. I did it in 2 strokes, I believe. 2 big brush strokes that are going to represent the shape of that leaf. Okay, we'll leave that there. Now that's going to represent my leaf right now. Now, I'm going to add some of the red apple. So first we need to get some paint. Now, as I'm looking at this photograph, I want to start painting the red of the apple, but I'm looking down at this photograph on the bottom, which is my black and white photograph, and I'm noticing that that red of the apple is actually a little bit darker than that green, at least in my photograph here. So, what that means to me is that I need to make that red a little bit darker, which brings me to my second point, which is values. That second basic principle is values. And what values are is they refer to how light or how dark a color is. So if I had the red color next to the green color, you can see in my black and white photograph that that red color is actually going to be darker than the green. So I know that I have to make my red color a little bit darker in order for the value relationships, that means how one value relates to another, is correct. Because I know that if I get all of these lights and darks correct, it should give me a three-dimensional look on the canvas. So that's really what I'm going to try to do now. It needs to be a little bit darker than that green. So I'll add a little bit of alizarin crimson and a little bit of Prussian green. As I'm mixing colors, actually color is one of the four principles as well. You notice that I mixed a little bit of green inside of that red. The reason I put green inside of that red was because green is the complementary color of red. And I go into further details as far as what a complementary color is, which is actually an opposite color on the color wheel. And the color wheel is explained in further detail in my DVD on color, but I just wanted to introduce color to you as well, because color can produce an emotion in people that no other tool can, like that's available to an artist. So let me do a little bit of, I'm going to try to get this shape here, this big shape of red. And again, this isn't going to be an exact apple, exactly like the apple in the photograph, but it's going to give you a good idea of how to use these principles that I'm talking about as far as drawing and values, and we just talked a little bit about color there. Get a little bit lighter here, a little bit lighter red. Remember, we have to get it's a little bit lighter red up here, right in there. You have to make that value correct in order to get that three-dimensional look. And basically, I'm just putting in my big shapes. That's really what you want to do when you think about painting. Don't think so much about the actual object. Don't think so much about making this look like an apple. Instead, just think of the shapes that make up the apple. And that's when your drawing really comes into play. That's what's meant by drawing. Seeing things as shapes. And putting those shapes down accurately. Okay, I'm going to lay in a little more. These shapes here. Doesn't take much to get this picture to start looking like an apple, as you'll see in just a minute. And all I'm doing, I'm not trying to be very detailed or anything like that. I'm just looking at the big shapes, and those big shapes are what is important. Okay, now I see a different shape here. It's a little bit lighter shape, so let me go ahead and put that one in there since I'm down there. And I'm going to add a little bit of ultramarine blue, just to create a little bit of difference in there. Instead of it just being a different shade of red, how about I add a little bit of ultramarine blue with that red, and it kind of turns it a little more of a purple color, because mixing that primary color red with the primary color blue actually gives you a purple color, which I also talk about in the color demonstration. Now, I want this to come across here, so let's do that. And since I'm here, why don't we go ahead and do this shape too? This shape's a little bit lighter on the other side, but let's go ahead and do that. Let's add a little bit of viridian to that. As you're looking at this, you might say, well, why aren't you taking time to blend those colors in and make them look more like they should? It might look like it's wrong now, but I'm actually laying the groundwork for pulling these colors together and modifying the edges and blending later on. But right now, I'm just interested in getting those big shapes, because that's really what's important. And then what I do with those shapes can come a little bit later. I'm going to hop back up here. Oops, picked up a little bit of different color there. This kind of has an angle on it. Kind of comes down, that shape does. So it needs to be a little bit darker though, because the value is a little bit darker in there. So let's go ahead and make that value a little darker. Okay. Now, let's get a little shape in here. Again, I'm just thinking about little shapes and how those shapes fit together. Now I want to go down to the bottom of the apple. And this is really dark down here. Let me go ahead and put a really dark value. Adding a little bit of Prussian green with that alizarin crimson, which produces a very dark color, a very dark value. Value and color are two principles that, when it comes to color, you have to have value. So it's important to know both the principles and how each one applies to each other. That's the interesting thing about these four principles, is that they all work together. And as a painter, if you can get all four of them to work together, then you can paint anything you want and anything you'd like. Just gonna get this shape a little better. Okay, Now, as I look at this, I know I need to come in a little bit more here. Something's not quite right up here. So before I do that, I'm going to look in a handheld mirror real quick, which gives me a reverse image just to let me know how far off or how accurate I am on my drawing as well, because it gives me a new perspective. And I think I just need to come up just a little bit more on that one side and then narrow this in a little bit. So come up a little bit more over here and then narrow this. Let me go ahead and put that up there since I have it. And that's a little bit lighter value up there. Okay. Then take off a little bit of this over here, just with a paper towel and some paint thinner. Removes the paint. Now in a minute I'm going to come in here and put more of a white background around this, just to have a wet surface to be able to work some edges, which brings me to another point, which is our last principle, our fourth principle, edges. Edges are very important because edges, they're like the punctuation in painting. Have you ever heard the term, it's not what you say, but how you say it? The same thing goes for painting. It's not just what you paint, but it's how you paint it. And one way that we as artists can be very expressive in our painting is edges. And edges allow us to either emphasize certain areas of the painting or downplay other areas. And so edges are extremely important, and that is the fourth principle that's extremely important to know as an artist. I'm going to go ahead and do this dark color down here at the bottom, and then we're going to pull a couple of big shapes together and see what happens. Again, just having fun painting, because painting should be fun. It really is enjoyable to be able to paint, and it's even more enjoyable when you know the four principles, because then you have a knowledge of how to paint and what you can actually do in paint. Because it's so frustrating as a beginner to sit down and try to figure out how to paint when no one has told you or given you any guides or anything whatsoever. But if you have principles that can guide you through a painting, the whole process is much more enjoyable, because then you're not just trying to figure out how to paint, you're trying to figure out how to become a better painter and how to push those abilities that you've been given to the next level. Okay, let's go for that highlight here. This is one big shape here. I need this to be, I'm going to put a little bit of manganese blue, which is a warm blue. When I talk about warm and cool colors, I go into more in depth than that in my color DVD. But a cool color would be considered like a blue or a green or a purple color, but a warm color would be considered like a yellow or an orange or a red. And basically people associate certain things. Like the sun is hot, so it's like a yellow color. Fire is hot, orange and red, things like that. Or they would say ice is blue. And people tend to associate different temperatures with different colors, and that's what I mean when I talk about color temperature. Trying to get there we go, not just a blue, but a nice, let's get this half of the shape first. Okay, and let's get the other half of the shape. That other half is going to be a little bit darker in value. As I'm working on this, all these little shapes of lights and darks are very important because that is actually representing the light that is reflecting off of these objects, or off of this apple in this case. And I know that if I can get those shapes accurate and correct, then it should give me the illusion of whatever object is in front of me, or whatever object I'm trying to paint. Let's see, we need a little darker color. And that three-dimensional look is very important in representational art, because in representational art you're trying to do what it says. You're trying to represent something. You're trying to make something look the way it appears in nature, or else give the illusion of it. Okay, let's make that one big shape here. Okay. Now in a minute I'm going to go ahead and pull all this together, but right now I'm still trying to get some shapes down. Let's go with a little lighter. Go with cadmium scarlet, which is a warm red. Okay. Sort of like that warm color. I'm going to add a little cadmium green pale to that cadmium scarlet. I'm going to see if I can introduce just a little bit down here as well into this shape, just to help give the illusion of maybe some warm reflected light coming back up in there. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and do a little bit of painting here, and then we'll talk about edges as we finish up. Okay, the reason I'm adding all this white, I took a few minutes, took about 10 minutes to do a little more painting on this apple. And the reason I'm putting all of this white in here is because the photo that I'm using has a white background which is very light. And in order for me to really show you how to use the fourth principle, which is edges, I need a wet surface for all of this wet oil paint in the apple here to work into. So what I'm doing is just putting down a white background with just simply titanium white, just simple white in the background. I wouldn't normally do this on just on a portrait or any painting that I'm doing, but for this demonstration it'll just give you an idea as far as what you can do when you use the principle of edges. I've got too much paint there. Now, the principle of edges is there's a balance between various edges, either hard edge or soft edge, and right now, okay, see what I just did there? I took that white and blended it in there with one stroke, and that gave me sort of a soft edge. It gave me a softer edge than what was there. Now if I do the same thing at a couple of other places around this apple, see, soften just a couple of other areas. Even that produces an interesting edge because you still have a little bit of that red kind of showing through as well. And let's see, as it comes down here, just trying to find a little bit of an angle on that apple, which tends to help give it strength as far as in terms of drawing goes. And bring it down here. And then I'm going to go back with just a little bit of a brush and kind of blend this in, because that's kind of a soft edge that I'm seeing there. Okay, and then a couple more soft edges, and then I think we're ready to put in our stem of the apple. I waited on the stem till the end there because it's like a little accent, and I'll show you what it does. It'll actually help it look more like an apple when we're finished here too. And we'll just soften that shadow underneath. And we'll do a little softness just in the leaf there, and then we'll put the stem. And I think that'll give you a good idea. Let me see one more thing here. Okay, let's soften that shadow. This is the reason I wanted that, part of the reason that I wanted that white to work into. See that soft edge that I can get by doing that? I can't get that if I don't have something wet to work into. Now, if I was to take more time on this apple, I could make it look more like that particular apple, or more photorealistic if I wanted to, but that's not my goal. My goal in doing this is to interpret this apple and to make it, to show you how simple it can be just to use the 4 basic principles in painting a simple object like an apple. that you don't have to spend forever. Okay, now I think I just want to get a stem in there, and then we'll put that on top. Let me just double check. And that's a pretty good apple. It'll give you a good idea. So let's go ahead and put a stem in there. I want it to be I'm going to put alizarin crimson and Prussian green. Get a really dark value because that stem is actually going to be the darkest value in my painting here. So I need that to be pretty dark. Let's see. Okay, let's get the bottom of that. Okay, and then it has a little bit of a stem that comes out. Not quite that much. Okay, and then let's just get that leaf to have a little better shape. Clean off a brush here. Okay, and needs a little something right on top of that stem. And then I see just one little area. I always say there's just one little area. Artists are famous for that, but I see one little area in that highlight. I just want to blend just a little bit, not much, but just a little bit. Again, if I was painting a portrait or working on a painting that was a commission or something like that, or doing gallery work or something that I wanted to really spend some time on, I would spend much more time than what I'm doing. But this is just for demonstration purposes, just to show you that even though you're not spending a huge amount of time on a painting, that you can still apply those principles that you've learned, principles of drawing, values, colors, and edges. Those principles, you can apply them to a quick sketch, you can apply them to a finished piece, any type of work you can apply them to, because the principles remain the same. It's just how far you want to actually take your painting. Now I'm looking here, I'm just going to finish this. And then we're going to just get a little brush just a brush that doesn't have any paint on it. Just something we can kind of okay, and then just one last little thing. I'll put a little bit more of a highlight, not much, not darker, not lighter in value, but just to lay a little paint on there a little bit better for that highlight. I think that's pretty much it. I've demonstrated very simply how you can use all 4 principles, and I like the look of that little apple. Let me take a look at it one more time. Well, that's it. If you followed me, you now have an idea of the most important principles in painting. You know, it's funny, one of the cameramen that's working on this shoot went home and actually drew a picture with crayons using the principles that he was learning on this set. Now that picture is not going to win awards, but before watching this, he had no idea how to draw. So even if you have never drawn or painted in your life, you should now have an idea of how professionals do it. But even if you are very experienced, you need to know these 4 principles like the back of your hand. Like I said earlier, it's not because I hold to these principles. It's because the old masters, the greatest painters that ever lived, focused on them. Now remember this, if you need more help, I have a DVD available for each of these principles. In each of those DVDs, I spend a few hours discussing the principles in much detail with visual aids, and I also do a demonstration on canvas. In addition, I have produced a long demonstration that utilizes these 4 principles together while painting a portrait. You can learn more at my website at www.brianneher.com. Again, I'm Brian Neher, and best wishes in your artistic endeavors.